Thank you so much for joining us. This is a packed room, and I've got a real sense that these are popular people because so many people have been coming over. This session is called Clicks, Quality and Chaos, the real talk on media buying. I think it's the favourite title I've got of all of the sessions I'm presenting this week.
And it has not been generated by AI. We had people before pitch that for us, but that was our own title.
No AI here. I am going to introduce our two panellists. Before we crack on with the conversation. Here we have Vince Meyer, who is the Head of Strategic Partnerships at Taboola, where he addresses the complexities of mobile video, display and native advertising. That feels incredibly complex to me, so there's a lot to address. And I have Chris Kane, who is the founder and president of Jounce Media. Jounce is an industry leader in programmatic supply chain management and offers MFA detection, technology and data. So let's get into it, shall we? Chris, I'm going to come to you first, and I'm going to ask you to share a bit of an overview, and I'm going to say made for advertiser websites now, and then from here on in will be MFA, just so we're all clear. Tell us a little bit more about made for advertiser websites and the role of your company, Jounce, and how you operate in that space.
Sure, yeah. Maybe I'll take it in the opposite order. We're a research business. We study the way that money moves from DSPs to publishers, and we built a whole bunch of data systems to try to put some rigor behind understanding the actual movement of money. And then we publish monthly research and webinars and that sort of thing. In 2020, a handful of pretty thoughtful people at a bunch of big buy-side companies sort of mentioned to me and some other people on my team that there has been a handful of websites, or groups of websites, that experienced this sort of like absolutely astronomical growth. Like, what is this? What's going on here? We started to study it. And it was one of these things where it's sort of like everything feels foggy. It's like you're reaching around in the dark a little bit, and you're like, there's something here, but I don't quite know what I'm looking at. And fast forward through many years of research, the thing that you just referenced, made for advertising supply, is what we were looking at. And it were these websites or these portfolios of websites that were able to fuel rapid growth through traffic arbitrage. They would buy traffic. They would run ads to promote clickbaity sorts of content, drive traffic to their website, and try to generate more advertising revenue on the resulting page view than the cost of acquiring that traffic. And if you do that well, the rough math, now with the benefit of being able to sort of see this thing in hindsight, the rough math is you pay 5 cents for a click, and if you sell about 50 ads in the next 2 minutes, you can make back more than 5 cents of gross ad revenue, and you've got an arbitrage opportunity. If you do that, well, then rinse and repeat. Just do that over and over again, and that's where you're able to grow really rapidly. So that's what made for advertising publishers are. We did a bunch of research, as I said, to try to help ourselves and our clients understand the whole category and how it grew and all of that. Along the way, we got reasonably good at being able to detect who are these sites. By the way, nothing about what I said so far is intrinsically a problem. We just got good at sort of saying, oh, this is like a thing. It's like a category of advertisers. There's news sites, there's MFA sites. But I think what was really important was by, I don't know, late 23, it started to become really clear that there is a problem with these sites, which is that ads that you buy on these sites don't drive sales. They don't influence consumer purchase decisions. And I think like any reasonable market participant would look at these sites and be like, yeah, no shit. Like, of course it doesn't generate sales. But you got to do the work. You can't just sort of have like a yuck reaction and then decide to avoid this stuff. Anyway, it became quite clear by the end of 23 that this advertising was not performant. It generated a bunch of vanity metrics like high ad viewability, low detected bot traffic, brand safe content, high video completion rates, low CPMs, but it didn't drive sales. And so where we are as an industry now, I think really triggered by some research from the Association of National Advertisers, is a pretty broad industry-wide effort for buyers to avoid this supply. And for companies on the supply side of the market, Taboola, Vince, I'll let you speak for the company, but Taboola and many others, to, at a minimum, make it easy for buyers to avoid this supply.
Yep.
Thank you. That gives us a really good understanding of before we go into the rest of the conversation. And I think what you've touched on there is that there is an increasing amount of conversation about these sites and what they do and how they work. But clearly, as you say, brands want to be on premium content. They want to be surrounded by valuable content. So how do they identify and then avoid the lower quality sites? Vince, I'll ask you.
Yeah, first of all, thanks, Chris, for putting things in such good perspective. And I agree with you. The interesting is like was not made overnight. It's not something that suddenly just popped up and, oh wow, we have to go prem on our hands. Something that's been building up over time. And as everybody started to make research, it became more apparent that there was an actual problem to target. I think to answer your question, the first thing is transparency. I think what we see is been lacking lately is a lot of conversation around, okay, what are we trying to go and achieve? And from a platform perspective, us as Taboola, we want to go and explain what our portfolio looks like. We represent so many publishers. We have so many pocket of inventory that we want to go put in front of advertisers. But sometimes it's too much. And at the opposite side, we just hear, oh, we just want to go and do this metric or this metric like we discussed earlier. So I think the first way to attack this problem is, one, have the transparency in the conversation. And then two, kind of like the point that you made, Chris, is like, if we have those conversations like we have now, we can prevent the gotcha moment, which I think what was my first reaction when we kind of like started to solve the things in 2023 was like, instead of being a conversation saying, what is this? It was like, oh, you're doing this, or you shouldn't be doing that. And it kind of like devalues the point of conversation. Like, yes, there is something that shouldn't be done. And there's actually a good path that can be clarified if you talk with the marketer, or in this case, with the publisher.
There's just to build on that a little bit. I think there's this ANA report that was published a little more than a year ago, and it sort of like lit a fire on this whole MFA thing. And I think, Vince, you captured it well with this like gotcha moment thing. I think that all of a sudden flipped the conversation from like a bunch of industry insiders trying to gradually get their arms around this growing pool of supply and grapple with like whether this is good or bad. Just to underline a key point, like we're not talking about fraudulent inventory here. Like it's not obvious. It really is not obvious. I lived this for many years. It's really not obvious if you're like an industry, in the weeds operator, what you should do here. If you're on the sell side of the market, it's like, I don't love this stuff, but there's like plenty of supply on the internet I don't love. Like I can't just shut it all down unilaterally. And if I did, it would really harm my revenue as a sell-side business or a buy-side business. If I'm a DSP and my marketer, you're talking about KPIs, my marketer's tasking me with brand-safe content and low prices and good this and good that, it's just not obvious what should have. And all of a sudden, I thought the whole buying world sort of like turned their attention, everybody on the sell side, and it's like, you've been hoodwinking us. It's like, whoa, hang on a minute. I don't think that was what actually happened. Maybe a healthier way, though, of thinking about this is the timing worked out okay, I think, because Taboola and every other ad tech company had years to sort of like grapple with this stuff and had done the research and had sort of understood the boundary, like, all right, this is the pool of supply that we're going to call made for advertising. And so when it became clear that buyers didn't want to buy this supply, the industry was ready. And things changed outrageously quickly. In July of 23, the volume of MFA supply continued to grow. In July of 23, 30% of web auctions led to MFA supply. It's less than 5% now. Like in a year, it's 25 percentage point shift in the mix of what's available. So like the sell side was very prepared to react once buyers made it clear what they wanted. And I think there's a broader lesson in there that maybe we come to, maybe we don't, but there's a broader lesson here. Like buyers need to be pretty clear about what they want, and the sell side, the supply chain will respond.
Okay, that's really interesting. I had no idea how quick that transition had happened. You talked a bit at the start, and you obviously said you were a research company, and so when you released research around this element, what was the methodology of the reporting? So, because there's a strong association made between Taboola and these kind of sites, how do you calculate which players are driving to the sites and which ones aren't? And have you got any insights you can share with people? So
you want to start there? Or you want me to start there?
You can start.
So I think Vince said gotcha moments. I think there's been a lot of gotcha moments that relate to Taboola and a few other companies. If you're trying to sort of like help a marketer understand this experience, like the easiest way to do it is like you go to CNN and you go to the bottom of the page and you find the Outbrain recommendations widget and you're like, oh, that's gross, and it clicks to this site. And that's a reasonable way to help marketers learn. You can do a similar thing with Taboola recommendations or others. And that exists for sure. That is one mechanism by which MFA publishers buy traffic and sort of start this arbitrage opportunity. But among a bunch of other things that we studied, we did some research to try to understand, like, what does the pie chart actually look like? Like, if you're a made-for-advertising publisher, how much of your traffic comes from different sources? And there's a bunch of wedges in the pie chart. There's a little wedge for Taboola, there's a little wedge for Outbrain, there's a little wedge for Google Search, there's a few other little wedges, and then there is one giant wedge for Facebook. Facebook is the lifeblood of made-for-advertising publishers. If any other traffic source stopped sending traffic to made-for-advertising publishers, nothing would change. I mean, that company's business would change. But like the existence of made-for-advertising publishers, the viability of the arbitrage model wouldn't change in any way. It is all about Facebook. If Facebook decided, look, we're not going to send any more traffic to content arbitrage publishers, the category evaporates. If Facebook decides they will support running clickbait ads in the newsfeed, the category exists. And I think, I'm not sure that is sort of like the most important part of this whole analysis, but it's an important part. And I think that's pretty poorly understood by the industry at large, by brands and agencies. Like, Facebook is the source of traffic here. And then if I can add one more thing, and then I'll shut up and Vince, you can talk.
It's okay.
If I can add one more thing, it's about the chain of payments. When a marketer buys an impression on a made-for-advertising site, the marketer's DSP pays a bunch of companies in the supply chain, and the money eventually goes to that MFA publisher. About 90% of that money, the MFA publisher then pays out to its traffic supplier. And so when you buy made-for-advertising supply, the company that receives that money in the end is Facebook. They get 90% of the money. Yeah. Again, like, there's nothing intrinsically good or bad about that, but I think it's important to recognize that, like, this money is not going to publishers or content creators. The money is going to Facebook to fuel this arbitrage opportunity.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you're bringing that up. I think to the earlier point that you made about us being prepared, I think that was kind of like caught us by surprise, like this gotcha moment. It's like from the when we understood what Chris explained, which is like from a marketer experience to understand the easier flow of buying, we are good. We have some representation, obviously, in some of our widget. We open obviously our advertising to self-serve. Anyone can go and decide to buy traffic on our platform, and so we've seen those behavior, but at a small scale. And then on the monetization side, which kind of like is an interesting one, because that's the one in my mind that caused the most uproar. Like suddenly marketers saying, wait, how can I be running on those sites? And for us, from an experience that we build, because we build native ads, by definitions, this kind of like quick arbitrage model where you have to show 50 ads in 1 or 2 minutes to go and make the maximum, it just doesn't work with our experience. That's not how our ads are built. And so to Chris' point, it was very easy to go and say, well, look, this is not the type of supply that we actually work with. It was very easy for us to present like a solution. We have a Taboola Select solution. You go and say, I want to go and run on this. This is something that can be certified. We appreciate your help, Chris, to go and show like, look, this supply is MFA free, and it's represent like big source of inventory from a scale perspective, but also from brand and quality. So it was really interesting that you can't control the narrative when all those conversation happens. But again, if we had like just sat down for a second to say, look, thanks to the research, we could actually look at the whole flow, and we had literally this giant pie chart in front of us, and then the conversation suddenly shifted to go and say, no, let's look into how the advertiser is suddenly surprised that is actually running in those places, which was not, I think, the main point of the conversation.
So you've just talked about both quality and scale, which clearly they're the two things that brands are looking for. They need them in order to get their messages out there. But I think that's a really hard balance to strike, increasingly hard in publishing. So how do platforms, measurement companies, agencies, that probably makes up the majority of the people in the room, so how do those 3 points get that scale without the risk of losing the genuine kind of engagement with the consumer? That feels like a hard thing to try and do.
Yeah. I can start. I think in a perfect world, this would be the conversation for every deal. We would have Chris coming to our meeting with the agency. We would have our publishers coming with our meeting with the advertisers, and we all sit down and go and say, okay, what are you trying to achieve? We're not talking about metrics. We're talking about what is the actual goal of the campaigns, how much can you actually stretch it based on your budget, and we'll actually create a plan. We were joking before the panel started. Chris and I have been in the industry for a little while. And at the beginning, when the whole world of programmatic started, we thought the advantage of it, the automation, would allow us to have more of those conversations. That was the point. Like, okay, we don't have to go and spend so much time processing IOs and building templates. We can actually click a couple of buttons, and then we can talk strategy. And instead, both sides disappeared. Now we have no conversation from the buy side. We click a few buttons, and we expect those interim KPIs to go and show that it's working well. And on the supply side, they don't have any idea of what experience they should build for the advertisers based on their goals. An actual goal, not, I love the fact that we mentioned, like, viewability or completion rates. Like, if I'm an advertiser, if I sell shoes, my goal is not to have a high viewability. I want to sell shoes. And so we lost the simplicity of the conversation by what was supposed to be helping us is actually kind of destroying a bit the conversation.
Yeah, I'm hardly an advocate for ad arbitrage publishers, but I do think there's like a pretty sympathetic storyline of sort of like how these businesses evolved. For all the reasons you were just describing, the publishing world at large has been told for the last decade or so, like, look, here's the things we need. We need brand safe content, we need high viewability, we need high video completion rates, we need low prices. And it's like, if that's what you want, like, we'll make it for you. Mm-hmm. And that is what these ad arbitrage publishers created. They nailed it. They got the homework assignment and they get an A+. And then they were told, no, that's not an A+, that's an F. And I think that's an overly generous view of sort of how those businesses operated.
Yep.
But there are some threads that connect to like very reputable media companies who are like, what do you want? Tell me what success looks like. I will make that. But what I'm seeing in the buying patterns is great high impact ad experiences that influence consumer purchase decisions and help me sell a pair of Nikes aren't actually financially rewarded.
No, exactly.
And I think, back to your question, every media campaign is balancing a whole set of like competing incentives. There's something about, well-lit inventory from publishers that I really trust. There's something about KPIs that I've been tasked as, important to be able to sort of like demonstrate success, even if they're kind of flawed metrics. There's obviously, this budget that I have been handed that like I ought to spend by the end of the quarter. And like when one thing's got to give, it's not going to be the budget, and it's probably not going to be the KPIs. And so there's still, the MFA is not zero, right? Like it still exists. And I'm not sure anybody's going to come on stage and talk about this, but like I certainly have plenty of private conversations, I bet you do too, where an agency or even an in-house brand will say, just turn it on. Just turn it on. Just go buy the stuff that's going to hit the KPI.
Yeah, we just hit the last week of the quarter. Last week is for every of my friends who runs platform businesses. It's always a smiley week, right? Like we always look and say, we had for the whole quarter this like really well-paced executed plan, and suddenly it becomes frantic. And then to your point, what I got to give? We've never seen a case when the clients come back and say, well, actually we couldn't really spend the money, so we're going to go and give it back to the advertisers. We'll figure it out next quarter.
We started studying this stuff pretty closely in 2021, like by March of 21, and we saw MFA supply creep up and keep growing through the end of 21, and then like showed up to work in January, and we're like, oh my God, like people read our research and it worked, and like MFA is way down, and what actually happened? This happens every year. What actually happens is December 31st is the day in the year where there's the maximum amount of MFA supply, because that's when there's the widest arbitrage opportunity. That's when the demand is the richest, and I can justify buying the most amount of traffic. And then all the campaigns end on the 31st, and they don't start on time in January, and so there's very thin demand on January 1st, and the amount of MFA supply contracts on that day. They're just responding to what buyers say, to the way that buyers actually vote with their wallets.
I think what you're describing is an incredibly complex market in a lot of ways, with that sort of strategic bit that's sort of maybe taking a step back. But I think from an advertiser's point of view, there are so many platforms, there are so many inventory types, there's so much stuff to navigate the way through. It's a really complex environment. How do they even begin to do that effectively? And how do those third-party measurement providers, how does that help cut through the chaos from the title of the session? How do they help?
Maybe I can start on that one.
Yeah.
I think the thing I'll propose wouldn't have been possible before 2019. But what is possible as of 2019 is a reorientation of media planning away from individual sites and apps toward counterparties, sellers, publishers. And you can make a choice that, like, I want to do business with Hearst. And prior to that, you'd have to go on, I don't even know, Hearst's corporate website, Wikipedia, and figure out what are all the, I think it's good housekeeping, and I think it's the, but there's well-structured data in the supply chain now that makes it easy to identify these are the auctions that lead me to Hearst supply. And that massively simplifies, you don't have to think about 1 million websites and apps anymore. You can think about a few dozen trusted portfolios. This is broader than made for advertising, but that's the thing, that's the answer. The answer is, as a media buying team, you're not going to stop working with verification companies. You're not going to stop caring about brand safety. You're not going to stop caring about certain KPIs. But those aren't enough on their own. Those processes have really led you astray over time. And you got to have a little more human oversight. And you cannot have human oversight if you're trying to get your arms around hundreds of thousands of sites and apps. But you can absolutely make a business choice that says, I want to do business with Hearst. I want to do business with Disney. I want to do business with these trusted portfolios. And in doing that, you can just put some boundaries around the pool of supply that you're going to buy, and just make a basic business bet that Disney's not going to hoodwink you. They're not going to do that. And you greatly reduce your exposure to whatever the next industry issue is going to be.
Yeah, but I think I agree. It's a way to start, and I think there's 2 points of your suggestion. One, from a tool perspective, I think I completely agree with you. We have so much more now information available, and I think we have to make those data points more visible, and from the buyer to also understand them. So there's a part of education. But at the same time, where I respectfully disagree, it can't just be a solution with you work with 3 or 4 trusted partners. Because we represent thousands of medium, small-sized publishers that spend a incredible amount of money to create good content. And so to your point, it was hard to call Hearst. It's still impossible to call Fox Local in Arkansas.
That's right.
And when you see the amount of effort that they put to create the content to support their local communities, they create content that is relevant for their users, we want to go and encourage them with them. So I think the answer is probably a combination of both. It's as a platform and other platforms, we have to do a better job to bring up those insights, to help creating the visibility and the education to the marketers. So we don't get closed into this conversation of we only want the marketers to work with 5, 6, trusted domains. But I think creating an environment where you actually work with trusted partners, so expanding a little bit your definitions. And I think it's on the platform, it's on us to do a better job to go and bring this trust.
This aggregation point is, I think, really, really critical. Everyone's gonna trust Disney, and you can work down the list. And then no one's gonna reach out to Natasha, who owns Natasha's Kitchen. This is not gonna happen. Mm-hmm. But actually, the long tail is also pretty well handled, because you get these companies like Raptive and Mediavine and Freestar and a few others who will aggregate the long tail. And so agencies actually won't forget about Budget Bites and Natasha's Kitchen or whatever, because they know that's repped by these partners that I trust. It's the middle. The middle's going to get left. Yep. It's going to be local news. It's going to be a bunch of sort of subscale standalone publishers that will never be blocked, but will just be forgotten.
Yep.
And I think you are right to raise that as a real risk. And by the way, I'm not even saying this is the right thing. I'm just saying this is what is happening right now.
Yeah, no,
as curation takes off, as the Trade Desk does their SP 500 plus thing, in all of as agencies build curated marketplaces, this is where we're going. The big guys are fine. Unexpectedly, the little guys are fine. It's the mid-market that's going to get sidelined.
I agree. I think it's a bit of a wake-up call. And to your point, it's on us. It's on all the people that actually work with those entities to go and help them, raise a voice. We see them doing incredible effort trying to do direct sales. We want to go and support them with that. We help them with our own monetization as well. But I think it has to become a priority, because if not, that's not the direction where we're heading.
Well, let's pick up on that point. We've probably got time for just one last question, and I think you've both just talked about trust in a really interesting way. So we've talked about tools and transparency, and I think trust actually is probably the bit that throws us forward. How can the open web, the middle, the long tail, all of those elements, how do they work on building more trust for the brands and agencies? Because that feels from the conversation that that's going to be so important to moving forward.
I'll take that one. I'll have to get your take on this. But like, first, I think we have to acknowledge something that we don't necessarily agree to, but the trust is broken. So we have to start from that point of view. I think assuming that we're fine is not a good position to be in. So we have to go and work on the trust. And it's funny, you know, sometimes you feel like it's unfair. We spend 30 minutes talking about this, and you look at how much the spend from those same advertisers is going into walled garden with no transparency, no report, no data. And over there, the trust is there. So I think for us, we just have to do better. I think we really have to have those conversations. So again, I really appreciate for you to come here and Kame for moderating. Like, we have to bring those conversations in a positive fashion, not that we just said about a gotcha moment. We have to go and have the conversation to go and say, what, Mr. Advertisers, do you want to go and deliver? And as a publisher, how can we create those experiences to generate that moment? That's how the trust will going to be rebuilt, not by just, you know, putting in between metrics between the two.
Good old-fashioned answering the brief.
Yes,
understanding
exactly.
the brief and answering it. Yeah.
The only thing I'd add to that is, you know, to the point of like subscale operators, tiny little websites know that they can't handle this and they outsource. I think the mid-market needs to eventually reach that same conclusion. And so mid-market publishers will either put their head in the sand and gradually shrink into irrelevance, or will recognize that like they do not have the wherewithal to manage all of these trusted relationships with the buy side, and will need partners that can essentially represent their supply to the big agencies, to the individual marketers.
It's great, really good conversation. Thank you so much. We're not going to take any questions, but I think you're both going to be around just for a few moments as we get to the end. So if you do have anything you want to ask or say or comment, then come and grab the guys at the end. But I'll give you, ask for a big round of applause for our panel. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thank you.